happy to be presenting this session, and this session is called What Goes Around Comes Around. As we know, that's a very wise saying, and this is all about the circular economy. I'm very excited about this personally because in Barbados, the circular economy is something that I can see we need more and more to build the necessary resilience to create a much more sustainable community, both on a regional level and then internationally as well. So before we begin, I'll just do a little housekeeping. I'd like to invite you to use the chat function to introduce yourself. Please say where you're from, where you're welcome, where you're joining us from in the world, and we'd love to know. I can get to know my community some more as well. And a poll is going to appear right now on your screen, so you can let us know where you are connecting from, as well as the sector and the industry to which you belong. Okay, so I'm going to let you just give you a few minutes to have a look at that poll. Okay, it should be coming up on the screen any minute. Let me know if you guys can see the poll yet. Okay, great, here we go. So let us know which region you're connecting from. I see people coming from the Canary Islands, great. I see people coming from the Netherlands, people joining from Northern Ireland. So you can see that we definitely have Europe represented. I'd love to see the Pacific represented as well, the Caribbean, all over. Let me know where you're coming from. Suriname, great, welcome, welcome. And let us know which sector you belong to as well. We have academia, NGO, government, or the private sector, and other. I see people joining from Curacao as well, welcome. Trinidad and Tobago, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, yay, that's where I'm from originally. So that's good to welcome you. And let us know the industry you belong to as well. Okay, I see people joining from Haiti, fantastic. Dominican Republic, welcome to everybody. We're very excited to have you here and we'd like this to be a nice interactive session. Okay, I see you want to give a special shout out to Creative Tech Hub hosting a local screening in Suriname. Please take some pictures, document this as well as you can so we can get the feedback and we can see what your session is all about. That's one of the Virtual Island Summit local events that our ambassador on the ground in Suriname is organizing. So thanks to all our ambassadors who are doing that. I'd like to encourage all our ambassadors to document their local hubs as much as possible. Okay, I think it's probably soon time for us to see the results of the poll. As soon as we have the results ready, we'll take a look and I can get an idea of our audience today. In the meantime, I'll keep looking at the chat. Oh, great, the University of the Highlands and Islands. Hi there, Andrew. Okay, so it looks as if today we have strong representation from Europe and North America. And then that's coming up, we have Europe as the strongest representation, followed closely by the Caribbean, and we have North America as well, South and Central America and Africa there as well. So it's great to see you all. And there's some Asian Pacific audience who'd like to bid you a special welcome. I know sometimes the timing is challenging and I really appreciate that you all can join. And the vast majority of our participants today belong to the private sector. Okay, the private sector is really interested in this session, the circular economy. That's quite interesting because I know that in Barbados, there needs to be a strong public-private sector partnership in order to drive sustainability forward. So that's very interesting. We have academia and NGOs as well and government. So that's fantastic. And most people are in the, well, this is very close, very, very close tie between environmental services and waste and circular economy, which is quite understandable given the topic of today's session. Okay, so I'm going to close the poll now, and without further ado, I would very much like to introduce you all to our panel today. As I said, I'm Stacey Alvarez de la Campa. I am going to be your moderator today, and I'd like to introduce you to our esteemed panel that we have joining us. Okay, so we're going to be having, I'm just going to check and see who's actually here. Okay, so we have two members of our panel here today. Thank you so much for joining. We have Akshay, you're the director of the Green Worms Waste Management. You're also one of our ambassadors, so a special welcome to Akshay. Thank you so much for joining us. And then we have Alex Kavasu. Thank you so much for being here, Alex, the Program Officer of the Circular Economy Initiative in Kenya. So I'm very much like to welcome you all, and it's wonderful to see.
I also wanted to inform you that we have Elba Raquel with us. I see that she has joined as an attendee, but Elba, I can see you now. So we have our keynote speaker here.
Thank you. Special welcome, Elba. I will confess, I don't know any Icelandic at all. I know some Danish because I used to live in Denmark. I tried to learn Icelandic briefly, but I gave up. I'll confess. But thank you so much for joining us as our keynote speaker. We are very, very happy to have you with us today.
Thank you for inviting me. Lovely to be here.
Great. And just to let the audience know, Elba is the head of the Department for Climate and Circular Economy at the Environment Agency of Iceland. So thanks to all our panelists. I'll just say a few words quickly about the circular economy. The circular economy, it's also known as the donut economy. You can imagine the shape of the donut going around and one thing feeding into the other. And it's a trend that's become more than a trend. It's something that many are regarding as one of the major ways forward, not just to ensure a sustainable future, but also as a way to tackle climate change and tackle the climate crisis. There's an increasing awareness on the part of consumers and the general public about the importance of being more environmentally friendly, investing in eco-friendly products, and then practicing recycling. And recycling is just one aspect of the circular economic model, and I know that our panelists will definitely have more to say about that. So without further ado, I'd like to invite our keynote speaker, Elba. The floor is yours for the keynote address. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you very much. Yes, like you said, my name is Elva Rakel, and I work as a head of department for both climate inventory as well as circular economy in Iceland. And I am going to share my my presentation here. I hope you see it all now.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Great. I usually work in Teams, so this is a great challenge to practice more in Zoom.
We're here to support you.
Thank you. So just before we start, I wanted to put up a little picture of Iceland, so you see where we're at. We are a small ocean in the middle of the North Atlantic Sea, just between Greenland and then Scotland and Norway. And just two pictures to show you a little bit from Iceland. We are a volcanic island, and we are a fishing nation, as well as we have a lot of tourism as well. We have some of the largest untouched wildernesses in Europe, which we try to preserve as much as we can. And we also have a lot of both hydropower and geothermal power. So we can't really do that much more when it comes to energy and climate, but we can do a lot of other things. For example, for those of you who know the term LULUCF, that is the land use part in the climate inventory, we have a lot to do there because we're such a largely uninhabited island. There's a lot of emission coming from the land use. So our greenhouse gas action plans, they focus a lot on this, but they also focus a lot on, for example, waste prevention and just waste management in general. So I would like to tell you some cases actually that we can that I can tell you that we're working with. But to begin with, I want to reflect on the title of my speak, which is "The Environmental Practices Are a Group Sport." Because if we are alone, standing on a mountain and shouting out into the void, then the effects that we can have will be very minuscule. We need to gain the backup of the public and activate the masses to be able to make a change, as well as promote innovation and private enterprise. So you really have to get both sides of the coin. And I know that you are very well accustomed to pictures such as this that are trying to depict the circular society, where we want to increase reuse, repurposing, recycling, as well as sharing, and try to decrease as much as possible everything that goes into the last portal there, the last funnel into landfilling or incineration. And we have in Iceland a local policy that is, of course, in accordance with several EU directives on waste management and moving towards a circular economy, such as the Green Deal and the UN Sustainable Development Goals and so on. And sort of the core in this policy is to, as a baseline, to ensure sufficient waste treatment and recycling, but also try to reduce the production of waste with, for example, multi-use products wherever possible. And also to activate the design phase in order to incorporate reusability and repairability into a product in the design phase. And in this policy, we use a lot of incentives through taxes and fees and regulations and laws, but we also focus on innovation and public awareness. So that is what I want to focus on today. And I want to show you 3 cases where our agency have implemented through those things, innovation and public awareness. And in this picture, we show a little bit how the policy is structured. So it's a policy going from 2016 to 27. And you can see that you have these categories that are in focus at certain periods of time. So food waste was the focus topic from 2016 to 17, and then came plastic, single-use plastic, then textiles, electronics, buildings, and then paper. So you can't eat the elephant in one bite. You have to take it in little steps. So this is one way to try to focus our efforts. The first case I want to mention is about innovation. And we have run hackathons very successfully, where we invite a lot of interested parties to come in and join us for a hackathon, which we carefully plan and offer them as much assistance as we can, so that they can both get good introduction into the topics that we're discussing. That is to say, the actual environmental aspects that are current in specific topics, like, for example, textiles or plastics or what have you. And they also get assistance in how to make plans for operating innovation companies or just product or project management for these kind of projects. And out of this, we have gotten some great ideas. For example, when we have the plastic hackathon, we got this solution, or sorry, it wasn't just plastic, it was just packaging. So this is from one of the country's largest chains of food stores, and they have introduced this. This is a milk refill station where you can buy a glass bottle and then you can come and refill it in a station such as this. So we have no other solution like this in Iceland currently. We only have typical milk cartons. So this is a lovely innovation that we hope we'll see. We hope we'll see that it will stay in place. Regarding textile hackathons, we also got this great little company. They are a leasing company, and they lease high fashion brand clothes that usually people buy and use very seldomly when they buy them. So this is a way of targeting both textiles but also women, because we find that in textiles, women are a larger contributor to waste, amount of waste in textile than men. So this is a very targeted assignment. Now, I want to show you another case as well, where we have used a lot of visual aid to spark a conversation amongst the public. And so here we are, as you can see, we're targeting single-use plastics, and we use these kind of visual aids to put it into the context of nature. And so this was both an animated video where the cup sort of blows in the wind and stops, and their hand comes and draws a little bird, and then the wind comes and blows the plastic further on. And by putting it into this context of nature, it really helps people to have a conversation about this. So we are focusing here on single-use plastics, and we have, in connection with this sort of campaign, we started up a big cooperation with, for example, organizations of retailers and wholesales, and trying to help them and explaining new EU rules for example, where you were banning the sales of certain single-use plastic products. And also they had to, these stores had to now take fees for plastic containers in takeaway, and they had to make this visible for the customer. And this is something that they really needed assistance in understanding and sort of realizing the scope of these new rules. And by usual, for example, here is a plastic bag, and these bans, for example, covered that you couldn't give away free plastic bags in stores anymore. You could buy paper bags, or you could come in with your own multi-use bag. And this is something that everyone feels the effect of when they're in the store. But it's easy for that sort of ban to just become focused on the money it costs more, or it's more problematic for me. I tend to forget the bag or something. It's really easy for a ban like that to become very individualized in our how we view it and how we talk about it. So we thought it was really important to put this ban and this conversation in the context of the ecosystem, like we're trying to do here. So I'm just going to run really quickly through some more of these ideas that we did. Here we have textiles, and the same sort of imagery was used for textiles as well, and also for small electronics. So we have found that this campaign has been really useful for us to have a larger discussion with both the public and also the relevant parties that have to sort of be active in implementing this. Now, the third case that I want to present to you is something that's called Green Steps. The Green Steps is a way of reducing negative environmental effects on the public sector. So here we are focusing on the government institutions, state-owned companies, ministries, and so on. And those are really, I mean, when you combine all of them, there's a lot of people that work for these agencies. So we wanted to reach them as a mass. This is a big mass that we can influence through this project. So the goal is also to strengthen the environmental awareness of the staff, to reduce operation costs, and also to make all the things that are done within this project, so it should be very visible, so that the employees can find it inspiring and can spread the word out to other people in their families and their settings. So it's statewide, but the city of Reykjavik runs a parallel system, and it is also an open source system, so private enterprise can use it any way they want. And just to explain a little bit further, so this system has 7 categories within it: communication and management, procurement, transport, kitchen and canteens, electricity and heating, waste sorting, and waste prevention, and then meetings and events. So what we do is we have different projects or assignments within each step. So let's say an agency or a ministry, they sign up for this, then they get a list of things that they have to do before they reach step number 1. And everything here is designed to be simple, approachable, doable, and then you get a little bit tougher things to do in the step number 2. And this has proven really successful. Both they get a little plaque when they finish step number 1 with the signature of the minister. It's sort of, we try to make it a little bit impressive. And it's proven very useful for, you can have, the agencies can be very different. You can have a hospital that's a public entity, or you can have, which is a huge entity, or you can have a very small legal entity which only has 5 people in it, or you can have an agency that builds public housing. So they're vastly different, but these steps are designed to be in such a way that they are fairly simple. Everyone can get started, so it's pedagogical in that way. And with it, in each step, you have 30 or 40 actions that you have to take. And to be able to finish the step, you have to fulfill about 90% of the actions. So you have a little, possibility to choose and pick and choose because of, like I said, the agencies are very, very varied. And for example, in step one, when we talk about waste, we could, for example, have, or this is an actual assignment, that you then have to sort waste in 5 different categories and pay special attention to toxic waste, which you cannot put in the landfill. And then you have to do 40 other things. And when you finish that and you go on to step 2, then you have to up the game a little bit, and you have to sort waste in 7 categories, and 60% of the waste has to be recycled, and so on and so forth. And then you have all these categories. So you have a lot of actions within events or within transportation, so in heating, and all of it is focused on the sort of impacts that any regular entity will have. So of course, there's a lot of circular economy focus in that as well. And this has been really successful. So we have already all of the institutions in Iceland and all of the ministries within this system. So all of them have at least finished step number 1, which means that we have 173 government entities, which can be, some of them are spread out. So we have them in 400 locations around the island, and they represent about 18,000 public employees. So I just want to round this up and say that involving big groups, such as the government institutions, brings us a really long way towards our goal of moving towards a more circular society and reducing waste in our systems. So whenever you can reach a big group at once, definitely that is a way to go. And there are so many more things that I could have addressed. I don't think I have much more time, but we also use eco-labels, for example, and there is an interesting surge in the demand for eco-labeling new buildings and constructions. And there we can have a lot of impact on circularity, because the building industry is a heavy contributor to waste volume. And also one of the places where you can, through very little impact, you can impact a lot by doing fairly little when it comes to setting a frame around the building sector. So I think I will stop there, and thank you very much for listening.
Oh, thank you so much, Elva. That was very, very, very both educational and inspirational to see the kind of things that are being done. So everyone, just letting the audience know, that was Elva. She's the head of the Department for Climate and Circular Economy in the Environment Agency of Iceland. So one of the things I think is going to be one of my key takeaways from what you've mentioned, Elva, is when you said, and I made sure I made a note of it, environmental practice is a group sport. And I think that's a very nice way to pull together the way that this has to be a multi-sectoral approach. There have to be a variety of stakeholders involved, both public and private, in order to make this happen. So the idea of us kind of coming out of our silos and making sure that we communicate and connect with each other is also vital. And that brings me to the point of communication, where the imagery used to impart the messages, particularly about the impact of plastic on nature, very, very simple, but again, very, very effective. And it shows us it's not just the message we have, but how we impart it to ensure that it reaches all the people that we need to understand it, which, because we all live on planet Earth and we all know there's no planet B, all of us have to be involved in what the circular economy is, and all of us have to be involved in protecting our planet. So thank you so much for that. Thanks, Elva. So you're welcome. Without further ado, I'd like to call on our second panelist, Akshay Kunteti. Very good to have you here, Akshay. I know that you are the director of what is called Green Worms Waste Management. Very, very interesting name again. That brings an image to my mind in and of itself. So it's very great. It's wonderful to have you here, and the floor is yours.
Yes, Stacey. And first of all, it's been an amazing platform. A few years back, started as an ambassador, got a lot of inspired, of listening to all the stories while being ambassador, and that's where right after being an ambassador, we were kind of scaled our operations extensively in India, which it's a very interesting platform, and glad to have co-joined with fellow panelists and thousands of, or probably hundreds of Icelanders for this special session. So to give a quick introduction, myself, Akshay Kunteti. I work as a director of Green Moms and majorly take sales and marketing, earlier head of partnerships. We started in 2014 in a small village, in a coastal village in Kerala, which is a part of India. And we've been trying to work on how we can able to tackle the waste crisis, especially in the rural and remote areas where there are no resources infrastructure. And that's where we realize this coast the areas are very vulnerable because in a matter of fact, this coastal areas have very limited infrastructure. At the same time, there are a lot of constraint on logistics, and the third was there are also limited resources who are willing to work in the waste sector. Because the perception, if you see as a waste, it's a very dirty, contaminated waste. Only few people are willing to work in this sector. So when we started in 2014, the people who are willing to enter this sector is different. And after a lot of work, pivots and iterations, we were able to, do a very good progress where we created 350 direct jobs and 900 shared mission jobs with women collectives. And 2020 is a time where we started working in the islands during COVID pandemic because COVID has created a lot of negative impact, but people realize the importance of the waste. And that's where, we've been, the administrations of Lakshadweep and Andaman. These are the two union territory islands, especially in this region of India. It's within the Indian territory, where we started operating in these two islands. So I will try to take you through this. Although I don't have a presentation, but I'll try to narrate very much effectively. One was Andaman Islands, a group of cluster islands within this, Bay of Bengal. And here the challenge was there are so many islands, and there was less connectivity between these two islands. Second was these islands also have a lot of tourism, footfall. So there is a lot of single-use plastics that has been been at the center of the focus. And when we started operating, we also find very difficult on mobilizing the waste to the mainland. And also thanks to the Andaman administration, in around 1 or 2 years back, they started ban this, the water bottles, the small water bottles. So which has essentially reduced the single-use plastic waste in water bottles in the island. So after that, there was a slight decrease in consumption of single-use plastic, especially in the drinking water bottles. People started taking their own bottles and trying to support the administration. We were able to managing around 10,000 households quantity of waste. What we observed was every year there is a increase in the consumption, which essentially contributing to more waste. So from the last 2 years, we are only looking at the quantity of waste has been increasing, but not decreasing, which is alarming situation. And here what we do is, what are the waste is being collected by the administration, and it's been sent to a material recovery facility where we do the primary segregation. Since it need to be shipped, which is 1,000 kilometers roughly to the main island, we need to ship it in a container here because this is mostly post-consumer waste, which need to be, there is no recycling infrastructure there. There are no, disposal like waste to energy plants or even co-processing units. So what are the ways that we collect? We do primary segregation, and slowly we set up a baler which compress the waste so that we can reduce the transportation cost. And then once we bring it to the mainland, we used to do secondary level segregation, ensure the waste has been forward linked. If it is a recycled waste, working with authorized recyclers, working with the brands to use this, recycled materials through ethical sourcing this waste. Secondly, non-recycled waste. Around 60 to 70% of our waste was negative value waste, such as multi-layer plastics and low-value films. And since it's a tourist destination, there is a lot of single-use materials like straws, glasses, and all, even wrappers, multi-layer plastics. So we need to send to cement kilns where they use as a alternative raw material fuel, which was also authorized by Indian government to use as an alternative to some portion of coal or other fossil fuels. What happened was after working for 2 years and also working for 5 years in the coastal areas, we realized there are a lot of plastic that has been heavily leaked into the seas, again through water bodies and all. And these are the region where there is a longer monsoon season. So all this plastic has been leaking into this water bodies and essentially to the sea. So what we were doing was ensuring that how we can increase the collection of waste, how we can increase the collection of the waste, so that essentially we thrive to a point where the source level waste has been collected. The second was litter, since it's a lot of tourist destination public space, how we can engage the community at the center of operations, we can avoid the littering. So these are the two aspects we've been focusing on this communities in these island areas. And third one is now we were focusing on, there is a lot of waste that has been sending to the mainland, which has a logistic cost. Again, there would be a contribution to the carbon emissions, though it would be slight. What we are trying to do is how we can create this circularity, whatever the positive value base or negative value, can be able to make some end products which are very useful to the communities locally, where the waste has been converted into end product which the local community can use, like something which can be used multiple time, making the products which has very multiple use cases or multi-utility, or which can be used multi-purpose. So in this mission, now we have scaled up our operations to 34 villages, because this island has a different villages and each village has different administration. So right now, the North Andaman, in Middle Andaman, so there are 34 villages in 14 clusters, where so far our focus has been, the Iceland has been collecting the waste, partially or above 50%. So how we can able to ensure the waste has been scientifically disposed while ensuring the waste, the recycling waste should be in the circular. Now what we are planning was how we can able to create the circularity hubs, connecting 10-20 villages where the locally waste will be converted into end products, so that we don't need to ship it to the mainland. There will be at least negative or hazardous, harmful waste, which can't be recycled or upcycled, will be taken to the mainland. So that's our strategy. And second was we realized this, putting the community at the center of operations, we were able to do this. And going way forward was this island communities are very wonderful. So we should able to figure out within the island how we can engage the communities, transform the local businesses to reduce the usage of waste. And now, as part of our mission, we are trying to work with partners, corporates, or any organizations to see how we can able to create a lot of awareness where the community completely take the ownership, and where the waste footprint of the island can be significantly reduced. Those are the efforts. Secondly, we have Lakshadweep Islands, which is in the Lakshadweep Sea, and also closer to the Arabian Sea. Here, these islands are quite restricted and there is no tourism there, but outsiders were not allowed. You need to take a permission to do that. So there we were not doing much of interventions, but the administration has finding difficult to dispose the waste. So since we are closer to the mainland, it's just few kilometers away. So we are ensuring that whatever the waste they have been collecting, we've been ensuring it brings to our mainland, where we have our facility where this has been segregated. But the plan was essentially how we can able to directly work with the administration on the mainland on what are the interventions, and also the same strategy. It's just that certain locations are very highly densed, and there is a average waste that we collected in Andaman was roughly 50 to 60 tons per day, whereas Lakshadweep is only 10 to 20 tons per month. Both are in the month metrics. So the idea was that whereas Lakshadweep, the population is less and it's scattered, whereas Andaman, the population in certain regions are high and close. So we are trying to build local based solutions with engaging the local stakeholders, prioritizing their concerns, taking up their ideas, and putting the community at the forefront. This has been successful. So the way forward, I think, is the island should prioritize the waste management as a one significant area, because all around the island surrounded by water, and only way we can able to prevent the leakage is having a prioritized, a structured and efficient and robust infrastructure which can able to handle the waste wisely. But long run, how we can able to reduce, because day by day the waste has been consumed at a higher rate, the materials, and which is leading to increase of waste. So we should also see how we can able to decrease our waste footprint drastically. So I think community is the win. I think because Iceland communities are very smaller. If we can able to put the community at the center, I think we can able to win. Thanks. I think I should have made it slides somehow, but we will.
No, thank you very much, Akshay. No, that was wonderful to hear, because I think you gave us real insight into the process that is involved in waste management. It's very easy to say, let's implement waste management and bring all the strategies and techniques, but there clearly must be an accompanying infrastructure, both in terms of policy and both in terms of who is carrying out that infrastructure. How is that infrastructure going to be regulated? And I know you touched upon one of the major challenges, the idea that, how do you manage to oversee waste management when it's remote and rural communities? There's also the issue, obviously, of connectivity when communities are, remote and isolated. And then there's the administrative challenges, the bureaucracy in trying to get the communities to work together when you need, the waste management process to be as smooth and as efficient as possible. And that's something that, many islands can relate to. The importance of collaboration, but sometimes it does seem a challenge, but it's one that it's crucial that we look at. And I want to say thanks very much for making us aware of the necessity of dealing with plastics. There are obviously other kinds of waste, but we're seeing that plastic is one of the biggest headaches that we're encountering when it comes to dealing with waste and recycling. So thank you so much. So we'll now move on to Alex. Thank you very much for being here with us, Alex. You're the Program Officer of the Circular Economy Initiative. You're based in Kenya, I believe?
Yes, based in Kenya.
Great. Well, the floor is yours. We look forward to hearing your presentation.
Thank you very much. So I do not really have a presentation, but more on a reflection on part of our work as WWF, the Worldwide Fund for Nature. And it's a reflection based on the work that we do both globally and also at local level in Kenya and in number of other states. So it's basically around the fact that we are all aware of the problems that are associated with production and disposal of materials, key among them being plastics. And the epitome of this crisis is actually plastic pollution that is now become a global crisis. And as WWF, we have proposed for the past 5 years what we are calling a systems approach, which targets 3 key pillars, which we are naming them as businesses, city level waste management, and of course a global set of rules that all governments can be party to and strive to adhere. So yes, we are witnessing very good signals that are seeking to promote governance of production and disposal of everyday wastes. But we need to raise the ambition in terms of reducing the overdependence on the virgin material and a steady move towards reuse models and, of course, more utilization of recycled content, among a number of other interventions that my colleagues have already spoken about. I believe that at WWF, our mission is to accelerate the transition to a circular economy where the packaging and the waste have little or no impact on our planet. And of course, there are a whole raft of solutions close to the hearts of most Icelandic nations is that efforts to combat climate change have mainly focused on critical role of renewable energy and energy efficiency measures. However, from a report that was published recently by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, as well as a team of material economics, proposed the fact that if we were to meet the target, especially around about the 45% of emissions that are not related to both renewable energy and energy efficiency, then a circular economy really provides a very systemic and cost-effective approach to tackling this challenge. And this would probably focus on just a couple of materials. Of course, it's cement, which is highly consumed globally. There's also steel, there's plastic, and aluminum. And of course, if we throw in the element around food systems, and we know that food waste and all the other issues really are a huge contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. So if we were to move to a circular economy of these three materials, cement, steel, plastic, and aluminum, then we would witness a very huge reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. So at WWF, we have proposed, as I wind up my presentation, I know we'll need to spare some time for the Q&A, five key roadmap to material circularity. And one of them is corporate and government accountability. And for example, in Kenya, we've seen a steady move towards ban of single-use plastic bags, as well as single-use plastics in protected areas and on the beaches. And this was as a result of the realization that our waste management system could not absorb all these materials effectively. And of course, there are alternatives. So it wasn't really hard decisions, but there is a whole discussions around what corporates can do and how can they be accountable for all materials that are put into the environment. And of course, also governments need to take the lead role. The second key point is around materials reevaluation, where we are talking about their necessary and problematic materials, and indeed they have no place in our quest towards circular economy. I believe in Kenya, for example, and all over across the world, there are the extended producer responsibility regulations, which would attempt to eco-modulate and ensure that we eliminate these unnecessary and problematic materials, or else put a very high price to it, so that in a way, the manufacturers would be forced to move towards sustainable packaging and products. Of course, there's the whole discussion around addressing financial incentives and designing for circularity. And the market signals have been supportive of the transition to a circular economy. And this includes the green, durable, and equitable innovations which supports recyclability and also consumer access. And then point number 4 is around environmental justice. We believe that most developing countries, for example, bear the brunt of some of the biggest products, and all communities deserve a clean air, water, and so on. And this can be, of course, be handled through the global legally binding agreement around plastic pollution. And of course, also the Basel Convention that bans recently the importation of plastic into countries that have no or very limited ability to be able to handle plastic waste as a problem. And of course, and most importantly, point number 5 is around international leadership. Of course, Kenya and the other African countries have been very active on the global response, but also the fact that we have already begun the negotiations at the UNEA 5.2 on a global legally binding agreement, then would need bigger support. The EU, like my colleague Elva has mentioned, is leading in terms of the Green Deal and also the recently included EU taxonomy. So we would need more countries to rally behind this global set of rules that would, in a way, accelerate the transition to a circular economy. And thank you very much. And we look forward to more discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex. That was, again, really, really informative talk that you gave. I also loved your way of showing us the necessity of a systemic approach and the way that there have to be levels that the systemic approach is implemented, starting kind of on a local level with businesses, as you said, moving to cities, and then on a global scale, looking at what can be done to implement all the measures and all the strategies that are crucial to a circular economic model. I also think it's very important that you pinpointed the fact that it's not just enough that we have this circular model in place and recycle. It's also important to reduce the production of the waste materials as best as possible and have that as two areas that are working in tandem. It's also vital, very insightful that you mentioned that renewable energy, or investing in renewable energy infrastructure single-handedly will not tackle everything that's necessary when it comes to emissions. We also must do our best to see how we can cut down greenhouse gas emissions through recycling and reusing products as best as we can. So thanks so much for that. So all our panelists, I'll invite you all to get back on camera because we're going to start the important Q&A section. I know that members of our audience have been putting questions in the Q&A. Thanks very much for that. I wanted to highlight some of the comments in the chat function. People have been very happy, Elva, with your presentation. They mentioned that that's a very practical model. I think your green steps, and I have to agree with that, the green steps give you a kind of incentive. I know, I love a plaque, any kind of prize that you can get because it's an incentive. But more than that, the varying levels of difficulty show, you're very aware that it's important to build and start small and start simply, but that everybody can make a start. Everybody can play a role. So I think that's definitely something that can be implemented, in all regions, and also in the global south, which is, Alex also pointed out, the amount of collaboration and leadership that's necessary. We need to rally behind one another, which echoes your sentiment about it being a group sport, as it were, environmental action being a group sport. So we're going to have a turn to look at some of the questions now that were coming through in the chat. I see that it looks as if 2 have been answered. So let's see. 2 were answered, thank you. So we have a question for Alex. Robert is saying that as a private company, it's quite difficult to collaborate with entities like the World Wildlife Fund because there are tender rules involved and it's an international entity. How can we implement a pilot project in the fast lane using plastic waste turned into high-end furniture without getting stuck in bureaucracy? So that's a very, very good question, Robert. And we'll have Alex take a shot, but any of our panelists can go after Alex. Alex, would you like to answer that?
Thank you very much, Robert. So of course, as a sustainable organization, we have very strict and stringent rules around procurement of materials, and our set of rules are actually very clear, and we are working across the world to try and encourage sourcing of materials that have been sustainably sourced, key among them being furniture, like you said, and so on and so forth. So I believe, I do not know which country you're dialing from, but I know at WWF in Kenya, we would be more than happy to initiate the discussions around what it is that you're really offering and how competitive it is. Of course, it will have to go through the entire procurement process and comparison with other products. And of course, if you're the best, then we'll definitely be able to do business with the institution of WWF. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Alex. So Robert, you heard that, reach out and get in touch. Thanks for that, Alex. So I'm going to move on to a question that came through from social media, and this is directed towards Elva. Elva, the person asking this question says they think the Icelandic programs are fantastic and can actually be a wonderful model for countries around the globe. So would it be possible for a country representative to learn from Iceland? Do you have exchange programs, for example, or do you have a way that people can go to Iceland and learn a bit from your institutions, if that could be possible, like an educational exchange?
We haven't had any request for that as of yet, and we haven't really been promoting this project without, outside of Iceland either. So this is maybe the first time that we've really been reporting about this project anywhere else except within Iceland. So it's great to hear about the interest, and I would like to say again that this is, of course, this is an open source system. We actually, this is founded on something that we borrowed from Harvard University, and they have sort of a, I can't remember what they call their system, but this is something that they started, I don't know, 15 years ago or something. And we were inspired by that some 10 years ago, and then we started developing it here. So this is an absolutely open source system which anyone can use for themselves. And I put the website in my presentation. So, Google Translate might maybe get you to some, extent along the way. But if someone is really interested in taking this further and having a conversation, they're free to contact me, and we can discuss this.
Thanks very much for that, Elva. Thanks. So we have a few questions. I'm just going to kind of bring them together that are all still open in the Q&A. And they mainly centered around looking at sustainable materials other than cement, for example. Are there any alternatives to some of the traditional materials that are being used that are more sustainable at this point? Alex, do you know of any?
So maybe to just clarify that when I talked about the four materials that would need to move or to transition to circular economy, I didn't talk about replacement, but rather better utilization, so that more of it remains in the economy and a lot of it which might end up not being utilized then, and also just cleaning up the processes that are involved in the production. So I'll also just share the Ellen MacArthur Foundation report. It's called Completing the Picture, and then how the circular economy can be able to tackle climate change, so that our viewers or participants can get more details around the conversation of how circular economy can support tackling climate change.
Okay, thanks for that. Yes, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, that I know that they are active on LinkedIn, and that's something that we can also Google to find.
Can I add a little bit on that one?
Please do, please.
Because there's a lot of innovation going on about recycling cement. So you don't always have to produce new one. It also has to do with the blend, how you blend the cement and what you put into it. So you can get a more greener, more CO2 not neutral, but CO2, better CO2 from different mixes of cement, and you can also recycle it to some extent. So that is something that we have to begin to create incentives, so that the contractors have an incentive to do that to a large degree. Also there is a concept called biomimicry, which I think is really interesting. That is when you think about for example, production of housing as an ecosystem. So because a lot of the time you have contractors building houses in many places in one town, for example. And so they have to start thinking about this as transferring their resources from one place to another. So when they tear something down here, they time it so that they can actually use it the day after in this buildup over here, because that's the way our ecosystems work. There's an outflow and an inflow. Biomimicry is a really interesting concept to use in building industry.
Thank you. Thanks for that intervention, Elva. Yes, I think that's very important for us to consider the necessity of how do we incentivize innovation, and how do we direct a lot of funding towards innovation. So rather than pouring lots of funds into the fossil fuel industry, for example, which has shown the levels of subsidies that are going into that industry, if some of those funds could be redirected towards innovation and innovating with regards to new materials, but also innovating with regards to how do we better utilize and recycle materials that are traditionally deemed as some things that we can't recycle and that we tend to discard. So there has to be that way that we focus on, again, also even the life cycle of materials. I know that one thing my parents always talked about were the way that appliances used to last throughout generations when they were younger. It was unheard of for, it was known a fridge could last for 20 years, 30 years. Now there's this element almost of planned obsolescence where things start to go bad, and rather than being repaired or the parts being reused, they're often thrown out, which leads again to so much e-waste. That's another rising issue when it comes to something that needs to be tackled by the circular economy. So we're definitely seeing that. I want to start to look at wrapping up. I think I'm really, really happy with how this session went. Thank you so much to our keynote speaker, to Elva. Thank you so much, Alex. We had our other panelist, Akshay, but I think he got disconnected, unfortunately. But we're really happy that all of you could manage to speak and give us some insights into, not just the circular economy as an abstract concept, but the way it can be implemented and the way that it resonates with what we can do to really create a sustainable future. And the model that Elva came up with, I can see, somewhere as far away from Iceland as Barbados, all of the things you mentioned in your green steps would really make a difference here. And I can see not just, in the governmental sector, but I can see that being part of a school program or an after school club, putting green steps in place so that we bring an educational aspect into it. So thanks so much again to everyone. I would invite all of you to check out our website at some point, islandinnovation.co. We have our new website going, and please follow us on Instagram. We have another session in 1 hour, and that's researching island education, lessons for the future. So we'd invite all of you all to stay and, take a little break, walk around, but please, we love all of our audience participation. Thanks once again to our panelists. It was great to see you all, and I will see you in the next session. Bye, everyone.
Thank you very much. Bye.